it was this weird. It coincided with the move of a bunch of people to the suburbs, a bunch of Jews to the suburbs, and move African Americans into post-war move African Americans into formerly Jewish neighborhoods. It coincided with leaps in recording technology, and it coincided with the birth of popular music as a genre that people wanted to buy, and the birth of the 33 1/3 LP record. So all these things that created this opportunity for entrepreneurs, essentially, I wouldn't say ride the coattails of, because they didn't exactly that, but of this incredibly powerful musical form that probably transformed the world in the second half of the 20th century. And I don't think I'm overstating the issue to say that.
How would you account for the fact that we have this really rich tradition going throughout the 60s and even into the 70s a little bit, and then with these girl singers and these women singers adopting, I think one of our essays calls it blues face, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And then it stops until Amy Winehouse.
You mean Jewish singer?
Yeah, also just like that powerful female soul singer. Well, and then after Amy, you get Lady Gaga, you get Adele, you get that resurgence. Yeah. But until her, you didn't really have that in the soul way. You had in the rock
music is
world,
incredibly fickle. Yeah, so things go in and out of fashion. So what sounds super contemporary in a couple years sounds very out of date. You know, I was at a music conference a couple years ago, and this is probably like 4 or 5 years ago. We were talking about female rappers, right? Because there was a period in the late '90s, I think, maybe mid '90s, maybe even a little bit earlier, where there were a bunch, and they were like, oh, and like across the board, so everybody was like, oh, what happened to female rappers was, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name. Lauryn Hill. No, Lauryn Hill. Because Lauryn Hill was like massive, right? And then she recorded this one record and it completely imploded, and all the record labels were like, whoa, we are out, right? We are not going to touch another female rapper. And then it took a long time, actually. So things go in and out of style. So Amy Winehouse has a shift from, from the jazzier first record to the much more sort of popular sounding, much more produced second record, was also a sort of move in what was going to be kind of hip, and then and the neo soul had also kind of swept in, and she fit very much into that box. So it's also not just her kind of writing a genius record and then it like hitting, or all these other things that were going on, and there are these cycles of what's hip and what labels are going to get behind.
I'm just dying to say something that I know is completely self-evident, but I have to say it. When you were talking about Rehab, which is like her absolute, whatever, apogee, and all the musical influences that, contribute to that, I just wanted to say that, again, very self-evidently, that the content, which is so transgressive and counterintuitive, like it's flying in the face of everything, like, of course you go to Rehab, and you go, I think people just really love that. I think it pushed the song to a higher exponent of impact. Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's a very peculiar song.
Yes. Yeah, but the content, I think, had a lot to do with it. That's just what I think.
I think so. I have a very mixed relationship with the content of that song, but given when it came out in my own life, but it's very. And she's like pretty aggressive in that video. Like she's not shying away, and she's like owning it. It's incredibly strong. I think, and in the song also, as bad as it turned out for her, I think in the long run, so funny. No, I think it's true. I think that the performance of femininity, right? Even though it sounds so much like the girl group songs, it's quite different from the like "Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow?" Like we slept together, but will you still love me tomorrow? I'm not sure, right? What happens in chemistry class? That's kind of the like that's the girl group version, and the Amy Winehouse is like, I'm a grown, woman. I'm not going to do this thing that everybody's telling me is good for me, except my dad, who seems to think I can get away with it, which has its own complicated subplots, I think. But yeah, there is something about her being the featured, sort of the featured voice, and it's her song, right? She wrote this song. It wasn't like somebody else wrote that for her, and she was like, I want to sing about Knock on Rehab. That sounds great.
It's still personal. That's the thing. It's hers. The lyrics. It's like what she went through.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So it's very different from Be My Baby and like all of these songs that are just more generic.
Right. They were trying to write for sort of generic. I would just, yes. And the songs on the first record are also like deeply sort of come right out of her, you know.
Oh, it seems like it, at least. Yeah.
I think it does. But to mistake those songs for the real Amy,
Sure.
I think it's a slip that we're all really, really willing to make, and it's really easy to make. There's a lot more Amy than was captured in 3.5 minutes of song, right? And she didn't write about brushing her teeth, which she probably did with some frequency. And she didn't write about going shopping, which she probably did with some frequency. So like, she wrote about pumps, but it's different. Right? She didn't write about going grocery shopping. So yes, I think there are autobiographical elements, but she's a person, like we're all people, and we all have moods and we all have shades, and we perform differently depending on who we're with. So when we're with our parents, we're different than we are when we're with our friends or our peers at work or our, you know, different people in different contexts. And she was doing the same thing. Amy Winehouse became, I think, maybe against her own wishes, a kind of a commodity in a performance. She was expected, she felt herself expected to do certain things in the mode of pop stardom. And she really resisted those things. And so while there are autobiographical elements in those songs, I would hate for those songs to become the sum total of who she kind of really was, because it was this very multi-layered performance in which race and class and gender and music and nationality all played into those performances also. There's any number of ways she could have performed her own tragic, like, breakup songs and life story. But it came out in this particular way, and we're richer for it, I think. But it's, you know, but I would hesitate to say, oh, that's sort of really her.
Can you think of contemporaries? I mean, you mentioned some before when this song came out, and then also sort of contemporary musicians that are using the same tropes now. Like, I can think of a couple, but.
Oh, I mean, the whole sort of Dap Kings world.
Yeah.
I mean, Bruno Mars, what's his name? Sam Harris? Is that his name?
Sam Smith.
Sam Smith, thank you. Sam Harris is one of the new atheists with Richard Dawkins. Sam Smith, thank you. Those are the people. Adele.
Yeah.
I mean, also somebody who has this just incredible voice. Right? So those are the people who come immediately in mind. I have to say that I can like dig into chess records and listen to that stuff for hours. I hardly listen to contemporary music. But those are the people who come to mind.
Bruno Mars is another Mark Ronson produced.
Yeah, yeah.
I just find the Mark Ronson connection fascinating because, again, like the song, the Rehab song, like that whole chorus, that's his idea. I was just reading this morning, just randomly, because I can't seem to get away from this, but he was just talking about how he's playing a concert, and when he plays his concert, he plays his own songs, such as You Know I'm No Good.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's how he refers to it.
Yeah, culture.
So, and he also refers to Uptown Funk as his
His song.
song. So, you know,
Yeah.
I think that there's a really big,
There's, I mean, the
there.
politics of songwriting and sort of cultural patronage are very complicated. So Phil Spector also,
Again, I
mean,
said that
you know,
Phil
you would say
Spector.
like Phil Spector, you'd say, oh yeah, that's, you know, that's Ike and Tina Turner.
Mhm.
They wrote that song. But Phil Spector would say, like, no, you don't have Ike and Tina Turner without the Wall of Sound. You don't have Ike and Tina Turner without me.
Right.
And he would say, no, that's they sang it, but it's my song. And I think Ronson's relationship to Amy Winehouse, as much as I know about it, which isn't very much, is very much that, and then who gets the songwriting credit. One of the genius things, one of the horrible things about Chess Records is that the songwriters, Muddy Waters and so on, gave away their songwriting credits because they didn't think that the songs were that important, but because of the structure of copyright law, songwriters are the people who get paid. Performers don't get paid in the way that songwriters get paid. Songwriters always get a cut whenever that song is produced. If you do a cover of my song, you'll get a little bit of money, but if I wrote the song, I'll always get money, whether you sang that cover, or you sang that cover, or you sang that cover, or whether that record is played on the radio. So like, if you cover my song, and you cover my song, you cover my song, I get royalties 3 times. You only get royalties once. So songwriters control, songwriters get paid. Willie Dixon was like the kind of house band leader at Chess Records, and he got songwriting credit on a lot of songs. So he, like brilliantly, I don't know how he did it, managed to get out of Chess Records with a decent amount of money in ways that the performers on the records, Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and those guys, hardly made a dime because they got frozen out of the songwriting agreement. So who wrote the song, right? And then occasionally it's like, oh well, we'll give Ronson a songwriting credit, but he didn't really, write the song. But I don't know enough about him, tried to look up a little bit, but I figured
Yeah,
it was
he's an interesting guy, and he's so much a part of her story.
Yeah.
I feel that
The
it's,
second record.
yeah.
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 And that was right as this sort of Dap Kings, like the neo soul thing, was taking off, and she has that sound, and he dialed it right in.
And I also think just going through your history, just that having that ear of like the Stoller and Lieber, you know, I heard this on the radio, I know that this is what it's going to be, and Ronson has that ear, and it seems to be all these producers, they happen to be, where is that
So the funny thing is that
coming from?
a lot of people think they have the ear.
Okay, but these guys did.
Well,
I mean,
Their timing was right.
Their
yes
timing,
and, yes
right.
and no. I mean, they did. Ronson has also heard and produced a lot of songs that are not as good as this one. Leonard Chess was the one with the ear in that relationship. He would say, like, I heard that that song's gonna be a hit. He's like, I knew it. You know, I only produce hits, and I know a hit when I hear it, and that's the one. And so this thing about having the ear for hits. If you ever watched The Sopranos, right? You watch that show? There's this one Jewish character who's like a music producer.
Yeah.
And he's kind of modeled loosely on Leonard, who like had a couple hits, and you know, they can hear a hit, and that's supposedly the thing that makes a good, you know, it makes a good producer, it makes a good manager, it makes, you know.
Right.
And some people have it, and some people say they have it, and some people can make it happen. There's no question that Ronson is an extraordinary talent, and he's a big part of the latter part of the story. But in some ways, he's not that different from Amy Winehouse, being somebody who could hear a hit. I mean, she wrote the song, who could hear a hit, who could pull the sound out of it that it should be at a particular moment, but drawing on all these other influences and dialing them in just the particular balance of oldness and newness, of familiar sound and new sound, of specific kinds of performance, gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, class, that make a hit. So it's not just that he heard it. I mean, he helped make it, but he needed all these other people to do that work with him. But other people, like, you know, Jay-Z would say the same thing, and Leor Cohen, who's a music producer at not music producer, sorry, like whatever president of Def Jam Records. Rick Rubin would say the same thing. I mean, Leor Cohen, Rick Rubin, both Jews, would say the same thing about their ability to hear a band and hear sort of where that band needs to go. But the band has to be able to go with them. I'm sure there's tons of accounts of them like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you should sound like, and the band saying, no, thank you, or deciding to go a different way, or imploding, or fighting it, or whatever. But yeah, the production is a key part, as it is in all this music. I mean, even going back to Atlantic, even going back to Motown, Berry Gordy was like an iron fist in the studio, and Tom Dowd, who was Atlantic's producer for all these incredible rock records, who invented technology so that he could get the sound that he wanted out of the musicians, you know, sort of left this imprint. He doesn't get songwriting credit, you know, he's working for salary, but he made the sound, you know, he made that sound. So the producers play a huge role, but they do it in a way that's tied to all these other forces. They're not working in a bubble either.
Thank you so much, Ari. This was so great. It really was. And everyone else will also get to see it, so this will be great. Yes, you're live. Bye, everyone.